and it also fights with other states. So whenever New South Wales does something, Queensland does the opposite.
Oh, I see.
So,
yes, Professor, I have been there for 6 months at the time in 2011. Yeah.
Ah.
Yes.
Was it useful for you?
Santa Lucia in Brisbane.
Oh no! Were you?
Yes.
That's
and I ran at the time. I rented an apartment with 2 rooms. Yes. In Santa Lucia.
So I live in St. Lucia. That's
that's
where I am now.
But in 2012, maybe you are not you were not there.
In 2012, I was working at the University of Queensland.
Oh yes, very beautiful university, yeah, UQ.
Yeah, who did you visit, or who did you visit there?
I was a fellow research and visiting professor at the ACU, Australian Catholic University. So in Banyu, it's very far from UQ, but usually I took ride ferry or sometimes bus from Santa Lucia to Banyu. Yeah.
It's a fair way.
Usually almost 1 hour. Yeah. I've been also in Banyu. I stayed there for 1 month, but I feel not pleasant because very lonely.
That's right. It's a little bit on the edge of Brisbane.
Yes.
You
know Banyu? Banyu is in Indonesian, in Japanese language, is water. I just wondered that the term is almost the same. The term of Banyu is same in Japanese. Banyu. Water.
Banyu. Yeah, I'm not sure where Banyu came from in English. But it certainly is a place where there traditionally would be water.
Yes, water. I have interesting experience that at the time I was invited by the community of Aborigine students, and I give a lecture, but only 1 hour. They attended the class, and then the class supposed to be 3 hours, but in 1 hour they went out.
I have spoken to a number of Aboriginal people and found that they are interested in, I think they feel there's some connection to Indonesia, especially to people in Eastern Indonesia.
Yes, Melanesian, yeah, Melanesian. Maybe.
Are they from one race or not? The people from Aborigine and the people from the eastern of Indonesia, according to you?
So for the Aboriginal people, they talk about 2 subgroups. They talk about the mainland Aborigines and the people from the Torres Strait, from the area between Queensland or Australia and New Guinea. So that group, I think, the Torres Strait group shares more heritage with or genetics with some of the people from New Guinea and some of the people from Eastern Indonesia. But yeah, so I think especially for people living on the island of New Guinea, there's a lot of relationships, between Australians. The other connection is that the people from Makassar would have traded with the Aboriginal people in Northern Territory and some parts of Australia, Northern Australia, for various things like tripang, or what we call sea slugs, and which were then traded to China.
Yes, it used to be during the Ice Age, the Papua and either Papua New Guinea and West Papua is unified with Australia at the time during the Iceland. And maybe because as we notice, we have also the same kangaroo. We have kangaroo and couscous. What is couscous in Australia?
I know what you mean. I don't know the name, but
yes. You know, the lazy animal that they eat leaf, yeah, they eat the leaf.
Professor Vincent, in my opinion, physically they are very, very similar between
yes, similar. And sometimes I found that the local language is something that not so far from Papua language. Yeah.
Even the language, really?
Yes.
You notice that?
Some words, yeah. Like mata, they call it also mata, yes.
So if the people from the eastern of Indonesia and Aborigine communicate each other, don't they know? Don't they know each other? Don't they understand each other?
I don't know. Maybe they are not understand, but they are not. They do not understand, but only some words, yeah, only some words, because they separated for a long time, yeah. We are talking about the ice age.
a lot of the vegetation in some parts of eastern Indonesia are quite similar as well.
Yes.
So I was surprised when I went to Flores and also then to Timor. There's lots of eucalypt trees. You know, the actual trees are in some places are quite the same.
Yes, eucalyptus. That the animal that eat eucalyptus leaf. Yes.
So it's it's interesting. Quite a lot of similarities, but then of course
koala, yeah.
Koala, yeah. I don't know if there are koalas there.
In Morocco, there is, in Morocco, and kangaroo also in Morocco there is.
I have seen.
Sorry, I suppose that koala is like, what is it? A little bear in my eye. In my eye.
That's right.
But smelly because
yeah.
I hug at the time. I hug the koala. Yeah.
That's right. They look nice, yes. But they can scratch. They can scratch. No.
Yes, they can scratch you.
Yeah.
Are they tame? Are they tame or not?
No, they're wild animals, so they will. But sometimes if you go to a zoo where the animals have been tamed, then you can hold them and get your photo taken. But often they are in the wild, they will bite you.
They're still dangerous for the human.
That's right.
Shall we start?
Okay, I would like to welcome the second speaker, Bu Enny. Mrs. Enny.
Hello.
Hello, Bu Enny. Are you with us? Are you with us now?
Yes, hello. Good afternoon. Nice to meet you, Mr. Noel.
Hello, Ibu Enny. How are you?
Fine. I'm sorry. I would like to open my virtual background first. Okay.
Of course, of course.
Thank you.
Yes, you need time to manage her background.
Last night the soccer is very lively.
But now I'm a little bit sad.
I was talking to talking about this before, and I think France lost. Oh no, France. Did they lose?
Yes, they lose it.
Oh,
penalty, it's very sad.
It's very interesting game.
I'm very
Very
sad for you.
interesting match.
Professor, so why do you follow France?
Yes, either. Actually, I am not favor of both. Yeah, I'm in favor of both because they perform very excellent during the match. Yeah, very excellent.
I agree with that. Totally agree.
Actually, I'm not in favor of Argentina, France, but
Both?
I mean,
You don't support both?
Yes, because they perform very excellent.
But I suppose you should choose one of them.
I can see you now, Ibu Enny. How are you?
Yes, how are you, Prof. Noel?
Very good, thank you.
Nice to meet you in this international webinar. Please come to Indonesia.
I'm going to be in Indonesia on the 5th of January.
Oh.
So I'm, but
On
mainly,
events,
in, I'm going to Flores and then to Sulawesi.
So the eastern of Indonesia.
Yeah, so unfortunately, I'm not traveling to Java this time, but it would be my pleasure to come and visit whenever I can.
Yes, I think that you have to visit our campus in Central Java.
Be lovely.
Someday.
Yes.
Okay, I
Be
think,
wonderful. You're in Surabaya. Oh no, not
we are
Surabaya.
in Central Java, the capital of Central Java, Semarang.
Ah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Good morning, Professor Noel. Hi.
Good morning, Anna. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Hope you're fine too. And safe.
I am, thank you. Yes. So thank you for doing all the arrangements for this
You're most welcome, Professor.
presentation. Thank you.
You too.
Okay. Professor Noel and Professor Dian, can you and Bu Enny, can you unmute?
Maybe we can start now.
Start now.
Yes, Mrs. Juli.
Okay, thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon you. Good morning, and we are very delighted to welcome you all to our international webinar entitled Academic Writing, Revealing Pattern of Publishable Research for Reputable International Journal, held by Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Dian, Nuswantoro. I'm Juli Ratnawati. I serve as Master Ceremony and Moderator of this event. Before we start, I inform the agenda of this event. The first is the opening. The second is the international webinar. It is followed by the discussion session or question and answer session. And the third is the closing. Now we move to the opening. The Honorable Vice Rector of Student Affairs, Universitas Dian Nuswantoro, Dr. Kusni Engse, SMM. Good morning, ma'am. The Honorable Dean of Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Dian Nuswantoro, Professor Vincent Didi Wit Arianto, Ph.D. MBA. Good morning, sir. The Honorable Vice Dean of Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Dian Nuswantoro, Dr. Yudita Setiawanta, SA, MSI, AK, CA, CPA, CSRA. Good morning, sir. The Honorable, the Head of Ph.D. Program in Management of Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Dian Nuswantoro, Professor Dr. Amron MM. Good morning, sir. The Honorable, the Head of Master of Management Program of Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Dian Nuswantoro, Dr. Yohan Wismantoro, SAMM. Good morning, sir. The Honorable, the Head of Management Program of Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Dian Nuswantoro, Dr. Mahmud, SAMM. Good morning, sir. The Honorable, the Head of Accounting Program of Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Dian Nuswantoro, Dr. Ratnawati, SA, MSI. Good morning, ma'am. And the Honorable Speaker, Professor Noel, Ph.D. from the University of the Sunshine Coast, Queensland, Australia. Good morning, sir.
Morning.
The Honorable Speaker from the Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Dian Nuswantoro, Enny Susilowati Marjono, MSI, AKT, Ph.D., CA, CFMA, ASEAN CPA. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to listen the opening speech delivered by the Dean of Faculty of Economic and Business, Universitas Dian Nuswantoro. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Vincent Didi Wit Arianto, Ph.D. MBA. Time is yours.
Thank you, Bu Juli. Good morning for all our distinguished guests and our distinguished colleagues also. And I would like also to greet you, to give a greeting for Professor Noel Scott, who will be our speaker today, and Bu Enny Susilowati, Ph.D., as also a speaker for the academic writing. Yes. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And I will also give a greeting for Dr. Yulita, Dr. Mahmud, Dr. Yohan, Dr. Retno, Professor Amron, Vice Rector for Student Affairs, to Dr. Kusni Engse, and also I notice there are a professor from Oman and Turkey that join for our seminar today. And as we know that academic writing is very, very important for us as a lecturer, as a professor, as a assistant professor or associate professor, yes. And our performance also will be evaluated by what we write, what we write in journal, mostly in reputable journals, books, and so on. So today we will have excellent resource person from Australia, Professor Noel Scott and to Enny Susilowati Marjono, Ph.D. Yes, and today also we're gonna appreciate the seminar made possible by Bu Ana Kadarningsih, ya, Bu Ana Rambing Kadarningsih. Thank you, Bu Ana, for your to facilitate this international seminar for us. And hopefully we, on behalf of Faculty of Economics and Business, University of Dian Nuswantoro, we would like to thank you for all participants. And for the near future, that we will have tight relationship with Professor Noel Scott, yeah. And this time also we would like to ask you to be one of our reviewer for our international journal that we would like to develop, yes, in the sooner, yes, because for international journal, our national Kemendikbud means Ministry of Education requires us to have at least 5 reviewers from abroad. Yes, we will have this international journal to facilitate this seminar also. To follow up what the resource person give us insight today, yeah? And hopefully this discussion will be fruitful and valuable for us. Thank you, Bu Juli, for facilitate us to be our facilitator, our moderator. Yes, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So enjoy your seminar today.
Thank you for the opening speech, Professor. Before moving to the next step, I would like to welcome our participants from Turkey, Taiwan, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Oman. Good morning to you all. Thanks for your time and participation. Excellencies, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, now we are moving to our main agenda, that is international webinar entitled Academic Writing Revealing Pattern of Publishable Research for Reputable International Journal, and I will lead the discussion. As I informed that we have 2 great speakers, Professor Noel Scott, Ph.D. from the University of the Sunshine Coast, Queensland, Australia, and Enny Susilowati Marjono, MSc, AKT, Ph.D, CA, CFMA, ASEAN CPA from Universitas Dian Nuswantoro, Indonesia. Before we start the webinar, I would like to welcome them. Professor Noel and Mrs. Enny, welcome to our webinar, and it's been an honor for us to have you both to join in this webinar.
Thank you, Ms. Juli.
Thank you.
For the introduction, I would like to read the brief CV of Professor Noel, Ph.D. Participant, let's see the screen. Here it is. His name is Professor Noel Scott, and he works at the University of the Sunshine Coast, and his department now is in Sustainability Research Center. And the academic qualification, he studied at the University of Queensland in 2005, and he obtained a graduate certificate in higher education. In 2004, He studied at the University of Queensland, where he obtained the Doctor of Philosophy. In 1997, he studied at Queensland University of Technology, still in Australia, where he obtained the Master of Business in Marketing. And also in 1987, he studied at the University of Warwick, United Kingdom, where he obtained the Master of Business Administration in Distinction. And before, in 1979, he studied at the University of Queensland, where he obtained the Bachelor of Science in Honors. And the current position, Professor Noel has several positions as adjunct professor from several institutions like Edith Cowan University in Australia, and then the Taylor University, Malaysia, and also the University of Sunshine Coast, Australia, and the University of Mataram, Lombok, Indonesia. And here it is, the previous appointment of him. I can read it one by one. You can see it by yourself on the screen. And he also has a membership of research centers in Faro, Portugal, in Padang, Indonesia, in Jiangxi, China, and also from the Gold Coast, Australia. He also gained many awards, fellowship, and also prizes from 1987 until 2017. It's a remarkable achievement. And he also in the membership, he has a membership of Learn and Professional Association in several institutions.
Julie, thank you. You're embarrassing me.
No.
No need to go through all of those things.
Yes, sir.
It's all
It's
fine.
an honor for me to read your CV. And he has also a very good experience in teaching, particularly in tourism. You can see from the screen. Scroll down, please. Okay. In terms of research, from the Google Scholar, August 14, 2022, his index is 52, item index 164, and his citation is, wow, 12,650. And he also gained grant and contract from the several agencies like the FEB, Cambodian Ministry of Tourism, Australian government, and also Cambodian Ministry of Tourism, and the other grant and contract. Okay, in terms of publication, he has published more than, if I'm not mistaken, more than 200 works, including books, book chapters, refer journal articles, conference papers, and others. I can read it one by one. You can see it on the screen. I think that's all. Okay, that's the CV of our first speaker. Okay. Well, I guess we have to start now. Ladies and gentlemen, without further delay, please join us. Please welcome Professor Nuswantoro, Ph.D. And I will give you time and screen for 45 minutes to present your paper. 45 minutes, sir. Now, time and floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Ibu Juli, and thank you, Professor, for inviting me here and allowing me to talk. I I think what we can gain from looking at my CV is that I'm an old man, and so hopefully I'll be able to give you some of the useful information about my that I've derived from my study. I'm particularly wanted to emphasize one of the things that was mentioned there, and that is that I've been doing lots of work in Indonesia over the past several years, and have visited Indonesia a number of times, probably, I'd imagine 30 or 40 times over the past several years. And I love visiting Indonesia. I think it's a wonderful place with lots of interesting cultures and history and things that tourists or people from Australia would love to see. So it's a great place. What I'll do is so I might share my screen now, if you don't mind. And so I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if I can do this. Share. What can you see now? Oh, wait a minute. Just bear with me 1 second. I will now, I'm just got to try and find the right screen. Sorry for a second. Put that over there, and then I'm going to share my screen again. Are you able to see that screen now? Is that okay?
Yes, sir, very clear.
Professor, yes.
Excellent. So look, this presentation is one, the topic of literature reviews is very important to me. I think it's a important topic for anyone who's either even a student or an academic to understand and be able to develop skills in. And I've been doing lots of work with PhD students over the years, and so I've found that allowing or developing skills in doing a good literature review is invaluable for people. So I wanted to talk about that. I have given the presentation in the chat. I've shared my presentation, so hopefully if you wanted to download that, you'll be able to. But let's see what we want to talk about today. So the first thing I want you to think about is why being an academic, working in a university, doing a literature, doing a degree studies, or even more advanced studies like a PhD, what's different about that from being a person who is an ordinary person without, who's not interested in academic life? Why be an academic? Well, I would argue that an academic, being an academic, is a very privileged and wonderful thing to be. As an academic, you're different from a consultant, a person who might do consultancy work, or an everyday person. And academics, people who end up as academics, are often motivated to learn and develop their knowledge and intellectual abilities, not necessarily because they want to be smarter, but because they like it. They like to learn new things and new skills. And so I would encourage you, if you are or you want to be an academic, to really think about your what you like to do. And if you are a person who likes learning new things, then perhaps you are in the right place in a university or doing some further study. So perhaps you like solving interesting problems. and are interested in new ideas. But also you're interested not just in having an idea, but seeing if they work. And if they don't work, then you discard them and you learn something new. An academic is not fixed in their thinking. They are always interested in learning new things and seeing how those compare with their old ideas. So importantly, an academic bases their thinking on prior evidence. So an academic is a person who believes that they is actually a humble person, I think. They are humble in that they know that they don't know everything. And so they're quite, they see the advantage of finding out what has been written before by many smart people who have published their work in books and journal articles and encyclopedias and things. So they seek to use the best knowledge they can in their studies and research. That means that being an academic means you have to understand what they call the body of knowledge. That is the information that has been written about your topic, the thing that you're interested in, by other people. That enables you to solve problems such as you might find in your research or in your studies in the best possible way. And it also allows you to know if your ideas have been thought of before or if they are actually new and that you are making a new contribution to the body of knowledge. So I think that theory, the things that you read about in books and journals and stuff is like treasure. It's like gold or silver. It's a valuable commodity. And if you understand what has been written before, it means that you are rich in your ability to understand the world around you. And so for me, well, for one famous person, Isaac Newton, he said that if he has seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. By that he means his understanding of the world was based on the work of the people who came before him. And that the work of the people who came before him is what you find in the academic literature. The problem, of course, is that there's lots of really useful knowledge available in journals and books and papers and things. But unfortunately, there's also a lot of bad things or things which are not correct or things which you may be different to the way you think about things. And so, especially in the social sciences, such as might be studied in business or in tourism, my area of interest, there's a whole series of different theories and methods and ideas which maybe disagree with one another. And there's also problems in constructing that knowledge because there's different people have got different skills in collecting data. They may publish things that they think are correct but are actually disproven. So the bottom line is, if you're trying to understand the previous literature, it's not well organized. And your job is to try and make sense of it. And that's a problem because the theory that you read in most journal books or journals is a mess. It's not organized in a very structured way. So you've got to make sense of it, and that's what you do when you're doing a literature review. The next key issue that you need to understand if you're doing a literature review, or indeed trying to write any academic paper, is the nature of a contribution to knowledge. So, you know, there are many things that you might read. If you read the paper, you might find that people tell you things and you have to believe them or not. Not everything that's written in a paper, newspaper, is correct. You might read a consultancy report, which has got some recommendations. But is that necessarily true? Well, maybe, maybe not. You can read textbooks, as people studying an undergraduate degree would do, and that might be both believable, that is valid and reliable, but it also might be new knowledge to an undergraduate. You might read a book, and that could be new knowledge to you, but not necessarily to the specialists in the area. And when you read a journal paper that's just been published, there's two things about it. One is that it should make a contribution, that is, contribute new knowledge, and it also should be reliable or believable. And that means the way that's done is in an academic sense is through peer review. Two reviewers read it and give their opinion. And it's their beliefs, their opinions, which determine if it's reliable and whether it produces new knowledge. And I've got to say, I don't think the peer review process is perfect. And many papers say that they make a contribution, but actually don't. So, but anyway, if you want to write a paper, here's the key thing that you have to do. You must, in the abstract and in the discussion sections of your paper, clearly state what your contribution is, what's new about your paper. And in the discussion section, you have to justify why it's important in terms of the previous literature. Many papers will say, we did this and this and this, but they won't explain why those things are important and new compared to the previous literature. So if you understand what a contribution is, then you'll be able to write, and you can identify your own contribution, then you will be much more successful in getting your papers published. So first thing, whenever you're thinking about doing a review paper or in fact, any academic work, begin by trying to understand what your contribution to knowledge will be, or what you hope it will be. And unless you do that, and these are typically written in research questions or hypotheses, and if you can do that and justify why those things are important, then your chance of getting a paper published is much higher. So in order to understand what your contribution is before you start the research, you need to think, well, am I trying to make a theoretical or a methodological contribution? And can I review the previous literature to demonstrate that this is actually going to be a contribution, right? So this is where the review of the previous literature is so important, because if you do that and you identify that there's this potential for a contribution, then your whole research is based on the right from the start. But remember, please, just because there is no research on a particular topic doesn't mean that that justifies the need for research. For example, let's say that you decide that there is no research on green-haired mountaintop tourists, people who go to the top of a mountain and have green hair. Well, I'm sure there has not been any research on green-haired mountaintop tourists. But that doesn't mean that studying that topic will be important. It may be, but it's a gamble. You're hoping that you'll find something interesting. It would be much better to identify some problem, some difference or lack of connection or between that you found in the past literature. Some papers say this is true, some papers say this is true, and you're going to try and identify why those papers are different. So identification of a problem or anomaly, as they say, in the past literature is a very good way to start to write a paper or to do research. So many times, these are examples of what people have in the past said might be a contribution in a paper. Okay, so existing research has called for further research into both career and life satisfaction. Okay, well, that's interesting. There's some justification that there's research in this area. Despite progress in the career satisfaction, this research is significantly limited and requires further exploration. Well, no, that's saying there hasn't been any research, therefore I'll do it. It's not a good justification. It could be that there's been no research because it's not a useful area. The literature is almost silent on the mechanism of impact of this on that. That's another way of saying there's no literature on it, so it's not useful. But here's an author who has asked for the inclusion of career satisfaction as a mediating variable between servant leadership. Okay, so someone in the past has, in a previous paper, said, do this, examine how career satisfaction impacts. Okay, well, that's the beginning of a justification for some research. Additionally, research in life satisfaction has been criticized due to its lack of focus on the work domain organizational settings. Okay, again, it might be a useful thing to justify your research, but it's not particularly clear exactly what. Oh, then sometimes people will say the literature of life satisfaction is relatively new and has been flourishing rapidly. Well, yeah, so what? Most literatures are, because so many people are doing research now, but that doesn't mean that you can justify what that's a justification for doing more research. And then furthermore, the role leaders can play in improving life satisfaction has received scarce empirical attention. Again, that's a gap in the literature. It's not a justification. Additionally, the authors could only find little research into life satisfaction. Well, yeah, a gap in the literature. It's not a justification. So contributions, things that you hope to do in your research or have done in your paper, are not gaps in the literature and are not areas for further research. And certainly they're not a restatement of what you actually did in the paper and the findings. A contribution is a justified, specific piece of new knowledge. So why do you need a literature review? Well, a literature review is a way to identify problems or anomalies in the existing literature. Easy. And typically they involve what you might call synthesis. So synthesis is where you're not looking at individual papers. You're trying to establish some pattern in the literature and some problem with the literature, perhaps, or some way of seeing the literature that you're studying in a slightly different way. That would be what you might call conceptual innovation. So, and if you want to read more about this, I've given some citations here. Undiscovered public knowledge. I think that's a very interesting way of thinking about a contribution. Here we are, another. Any review paper that you want to write, that you want published in a journal. So there's two types of reviews. There's review papers that only do a literature review, and then there's literature reviews that are done as part of, say, an empirical paper. Now, if you want to publish a review paper, a standalone review paper, that paper can't just summarize the literature. It has to make a new contribution. So, yeah, so that's what some people have called a new contribution. Any review paper must make a contribution. What do we mean by doing a literature review? Well, here's at the top of this screen, you'll see the problem, that is the topic area that you're studying. And it'll have all sorts of concepts and ideas being used, and it'll be a mess. People will have written about one part of it or another. They will have looked at some causes of the problem, some outcomes, and how all those things are related. Your job is to take that mess of ideas and concepts and to somehow structure it into theoretical relationships. So down the bottom, we see one part of that mess has been structured into three concepts. Concept one is antecedent to concept three, and concept two is a moderator or mediator. That's an example of trying to simplify down lots of this information, the mess, into some fairly summarize, you make a synthesis out of it. And not only do you that, but you have to see the problem, identify the various concepts that are involved in it, and then connect them to some stream of literature. That is, who are the people who have studied this problem in the past? And what have they said? So you have to take this literature, the papers that you're reading, or the problem that you're examining, and connect it to some theoretical ideas. Let's say that you are studying satisfaction. You're studying the satisfaction of visitors with some product or service. Well, therefore, you identify that one of your key ideas is the concept of satisfaction. Okay? So then what you have to do is identify that you are studying satisfaction, and you go back to the satisfaction literature and you see how that has evolved. You might do a historical analysis and say, well, in the old days, people would say the satisfaction was this, and then some new people came along and said this and this and this. And so when you're studying this problem, you are now seeing it as an example of the discussion about satisfaction. So the real world problem is about satisfaction with a product or service. But as an academic, you now understand that you're engaged in studying how the academic people study satisfaction and how perhaps those ideas have changed over time. And right down the bottom here, you then say, okay, well, if I'm studying satisfaction, I'm going to imply recent theories about satisfaction and study it in this way, because that's what the literature says is the best way to study satisfaction now. Okay, so you see, trying to solve a problem in an academic sense means going back to the literature, conceptualizing it as a problem with some sort of theory, and then using that theory to study your problem. So when you're reviewing the literature, you have to think about the type of literature review you're doing. And there are different types of literature review. A lot of people these days have been using systematic quantitative literature reviews, which incidentally was made popular by a person from Griffith University, at least. Catherine Pickering works at Griffith University. And this idea is that you can study the literature and identify some things in it quantitatively. For example, you might want to study where and when and by whom research was published. You might look at the geographical spread of the research. You might say that much of the literature has been done in Western countries and not much in Australia, or not much in Indonesia. You might look at the types of methods and the types of subjects and the types of variables and the different disciplines. And all of those things are really interesting to study. The problem is that they don't allow you to demonstrate that you're doing synthesis of the literature. A lot of this stuff is really just counting. And the key thing that you do in a literature review is not count how many people in different countries have done a bit of research, but identify patterns in the research. That's called synthesis. So I don't believe that a systematic quantitative literature review is publishable as an academic paper. However, it is very useful to do one before you begin your research. So a systematic literature review is very useful for scoping and understanding the broad range of theories and literature that have been used, and can allow you to focus down on one part of it. So it's very useful to do a systematic quantitative literature review, but it's not publishable as a paper by itself. So typically systematic quantitative literature reviews describe the number of papers by year, describe gaps in the literature, and enter areas for further research. And they therefore try and justify that they have created new knowledge. Well, so my comments are that description of the number of papers by year is sort of just counting. It's not particularly useful. Gaps in the literature are opinion and are often not justified in the papers. And then areas of further research are sort of like the opposite of gaps, things that you should do, but these are, again, opinions. They're not contribution to knowledge. So if you're doing a literature review, by all means do a systematic quantitative literature review, but think very carefully about publishing it or sending it into a journal. So what makes a review paper, or in fact any paper, publishable? Well, you need to review the published material about a topic. This is called the scope of your paper. Adopt a critical approach. So you need to, you might use words like, some people say this is true and other people say that is true. The difference between these two approaches can be analyzed in this way. So that's what I would call analyzing and synthesizing the prior literature and thus providing a contribution. But not many academic papers do that. And it's a real skill to develop that. I don't know what this is. Okay. So here in this has just come from, this is a literature review, and it talks about its originality or value. Originality or value is really your contribution. So this says, this is the first study consolidating the pricing literature, and it suggests potential research directions. Well, if I read that, this first sentence is telling me what the review's about. It's consolidating the pricing literature. And the second bit says we're suggesting areas for further research, but it's not telling me what the original finding is. It's just saying I reviewed a lot of the literature and I've identified some areas for further research. So to me, that's not a good justification for why this paper should be accepted. Similarly, the development of sports tourism requires collaborators, all this stuff. This is what they did. They did a systematic literature review. This review, systematic and quantified, examined bibliographic information, theoretical study revealed, this is what you found, studied samples were concept driven. All right, so one finding is that the papers were used limited to theoretical framework. Yeah, but you could say that that's not particularly useful finding. Most selected manuscript focused on, that's the topic of the research. And then it says, oh, and future research directions were identified. So you see, they're not clearly identifying what this paper did, which is new and significant. They're describing what they found in the previous work. Okay, so these papers that I've been, systematic literature reviews are primarily scoping reviews, which are preliminary assessments of the literature and are often very useful, but not publishable. Often in papers, you might use all sorts of bibliographic techniques, such as network analysis of the relationship between different papers, or burst detection, which is when particular topics will arise. These are interesting, but they're not publishable because they're just describing what's happening. They're not saying why it's significant. So how do you demonstrate analysis and synthesis? Well, you've got to have a good question. And so a bad question is, how many papers have been written in countries or universities by different authors or on topics and various theories? Or I intend to identify research gaps. They're not good questions. However, by doing this sort of study, you might identify some topic or anomaly or problem on which you can then write a very good research paper. But you can't just do it by describing the papers that have been written in a SL. How do you analyze papers? Well, one of the ways they talk about is using charting and tables. Essentially, this is like content analysis. During you read some papers and you start to identify key issues, you'll see in the table, then you add those things to the headings of papers. This paper is about issue 1. This second paper is about issue The first paper is all about issue 1 and 3. Then, so you can then categorize papers on particular issues and start to contrast and compare them. Okay. And to look at the overlap in papers that study various issues. So if you're doing a literature review, unfortunately, you need to familiarize yourself with the literature. You start to identify some of the key issues, and then you go and categorize the papers in terms of the issues, and then you start thinking about them and analyzing them. So synthesis is where you then start to reassemble your thoughts and your notes into an argument, that is, into a story about the data which points to problems and issues. And it's not just about individual papers, it's about groups of papers. So one way you might do this is start to use a research table. So when you're studying each individual paper, you make notes about what the author was doing, what the methodology was, the proposed solution, and then you use those ideas as headings on your table, on your analysis table. You might also look at concepts. So these are the main ideas that are associated with some topic, and you're therefore going to think about whether you are studying population increases as an effect of climate change, burning fossil fuel as an impact of climate change, or in fact the outcomes of climate change, such as rising sea levels or warming oceans or loss of habitat. Or you might be thinking about how climate change can be managed. Those are all different topics. And so by providing an overview of the main ideas, you can then start to hone in and study one particular part. So one of the things that I would encourage you strongly to think about when you're reading the literature, especially in journal articles, is to be aware that different disciplines have been used to study the same thing. So if you're a sociologist and you're interested in sociological concepts, you're going to have problems reconciling those findings with the findings from psychology, because those two different disciplines have different assumptions. So be aware of that, and and if you're starting to struggle between what the sociologists say and what the psychologists say, recognize that they're different disciplines, and it's probably because they have different conceptual assumptions. And so if you're studying motivation, for example, you might think, is motivation a sociological concept? It's not. Motivation the sociologists talk about it, but I believe it's a individual psychology concept. You may not agree. You may think that the reason we do things is because of social forces on us. And you may not believe that the reason we do things is from our own decisions. If you believe that we do things because society makes us do it, then you're a sociologist.
Whoa.
No, I agree. Whereas if you believe that you do things because we make our own choices, then you're a psychologist and you disagree with sociological assumptions. So be very aware when you're reading papers of the differences in assumptions between different disciplines. Also be aware that in tourism and business, the ideas that we're using in our papers are most probably old ideas. What this means is, what that means is that the ideas from, say, psychology, and there have been big differences in the way the psychologists have studied people's behavior, takes a while, like 30 or 40 or 50 years, to make its way into business or into tourism. So the ideas that we're using from a psychological perspective in tourism or in business at the moment are mostly based on the psychological behaviorist paradigm. And no one in psychology really ascribes to that much at the moment. Instead, they're adopting a cognitivist paradigm, but in business and in tourism, we usually just ascribe to a behaviorist paradigm. We believe that we study people's behavior, and that's why we study consumer behavior, not consumer cognition. So many of our theories and ideas that we're using in tourism and also in business are old theories, things that people have called zombie theories. They're dead, but still walking. Another thing to think about when you're reading the literature is that most papers are written about applying a theory to a particular situation and coming up with some facts and figures. So they're not really testing any theory, they're just applying it. If you're reviewing the papers and reviewing the literature, of 100 papers you read, probably 90 are of a empirical observation type. Some maybe try and develop a new analytical method. Some maybe try and improve a theory that they're using. And only one or two every 10 years might really try and question the core assumptions of a field. So what you're doing when you're reading the literature is reading a lot of papers which are very similar. They're empirical observations. There'll be a few, or there'll be some, if you're reading them, where you might see, hey, some people have found this, some people have found that. There's a difference between those papers. Alternatively, if there are differences in methods, then you might see that they're providing different results. You may see that there's some papers using different theories and they're producing different results. Or you might find one paper that's challenging core assumptions. So out of every 100 papers you read, you pretty much only have to really think about 10 papers, because most of them will be just the same. Try and I think it's often useful to know your discipline. If you're studying psychology or you're studying political science, be aware and look at the literature related to those issues. There's lots of literature reviews. So here's another thing. If you're trying to review the literature, never, ever start by reading journal papers. Instead, start by reading a previous literature review, because they've done all the hard work. They have analyzed the literature and sorted it out into different groups, which allows you to then build on their work. So don't try and do a literature review from new if you can find a previous literature review. How do you do it? How am I going for time, please, Juli?
Okay, you still have around 30 minutes, sir.
30 minutes?
Oh, sorry, 15 minutes. Sorry.
15 minutes. Okay, good. Oh, and by the way, if anyone, I would like to answer any questions. If I'll just try and finish fairly quickly, and I'll leave 5 or 10 minutes for questions in case anyone's got questions for me. So, but I'll continue on now. Thank you, Juli. Okay, so How do you do your literature review? Well, you might start with a search for generally useful information. And when you're doing that, focus on work in a smart way. Start by reading encyclopedias and start by reading handbooks, or start by reading review papers, because those are papers, those are things that have already tried to analyze the literature. So it will save you time. After you do that, then you might start looking at recent papers and fitting them in to the ideas from those literature reviews. And you keep going for a long, get to know the literature, and eventually you might even think about making some notes about the history of the topic, how it's changed, the key works and authors, the key debates and arguments, methodological assumptions, theories and concepts, and so on. So try and work smart when you're beginning a literature review. Start with encyclopedias and books, then review articles, and only towards, once you understand the broad literature and how it's structured, start to look at journal papers. Most people don't do that. They start with the journal papers and get really confused. You can do some other interesting things. You can search backwards and forwards in the literature. By that I mean, you find one paper and then you look to see who cited that paper, or you do backwards reference searching. You find a paper and see which references that paper cites. And similarly, you might find a paper and look for other papers that that author has already written. So those are all useful ways to try and get your ideas about the literature. What sort of things do you pay attention to when you're reading a paper? Well, the year it's published, the authors, the journal, the university, the journal, number of citations. These are all measures of, is it a good paper? Okay. So if you find a recent paper by key authors from good universities, published in a good journal with a large number of recent citations, then pay attention to that paper. If you're reading a paper, you might also want to pay attention to theory and think about when that first theory was discussed. Let's say satisfaction. Satisfaction is an old idea. It was first discussed in the 60s, and that theory hasn't changed much. Its definition, are there different definitions, and so on. And you might want to find papers and look at areas that they talk about for further research. That can be useful. Methods, same thing. So when you're reading a paper, focus on quality papers and then think about their theory and methods and areas for further research. And if you're doing a PhD, here's an easy way to find your topic, okay? Find a paper written recently by good authors from a good university in a good journal that's received a large number of citations. Go to the back of the paper and look for areas for further research and pick that as your topic. Now, it's not as easy as that, but that's a good indication of a way to find an interesting research topic to study. How do you write it? Well, writing is a skill that you need to practice a lot. And of course, in Indonesia, writing is difficult because writing in English is hard. So, but try and if you're doing a thesis, for example, write your literature review in your thesis broad to narrow. Start by talking broadly about the area that you're studying, satisfaction. Describe some of the sub-areas of that topic. It might be antecedents of satisfaction and consequences of satisfaction. Select one of those areas, let's say antecedents of satisfaction, and then look at sub-areas. Theories that have been used to study antecedents, pick one and start to focus in that area. If you're writing a literature review paper, it's a little bit different. You describe the broad field or the broad literature and then describe a number of subfields and try and perhaps relate them together. So the way you write a literature review paper is different from the way you structure a thesis literature review or a literature review for an empirical article. Always, always, always try and use some software to help you have make your literature review easier. There's lots of software out there that's actually free. I use EndNote, but there's lots of other types. How to write? Well, I always think it's good. Writing a paper is hard, but I think it's good to begin quickly. Jot down your main ideas and then go back and start to fill in so you might start by writing a series of paragraph headings or section headings, and then go back and fill them in with detail. So I reckon that you can often do a single, your first draft of a paper in one weekend. However, then you have to go through and polish it and so on. Some ideas for better writing. Always try and find a place, a seat, a desk, which is quiet, where you do your writing. If you have that, then your body becomes used to writing in that place and it'll be easier for you. These are a number of other things that you might want to think about if you're as tips for better writing. But one of the things that's important, again, is if you're writing on a topic, most people are not interested in that topic. There will only be a very few people around the world who are interested and knowledgeable about that topic, right? So your job is to find them, and your job is to talk to them as if you are having a conversation. So think about writing a paper as having a conversation with 4 or 5 people at a party. Imagine you're at a party and you want to talk to some people. What do? Well, you say, oh, hello, you people are very smart and handsome or beautiful. I really want to talk to you, and I know a lot about you. I've read all your papers and they're really smart. So I know that you have written about this and this and this, but I have a little question. When you said this point, what did you mean? Did you mean this or that? And that way, those people, those professional colleagues who are most interested in your work will start to say, oh, well, you're a smart person, you're an intelligent person, you know about my writing, and you've asked me a very intelligent question, so let's talk about that, and they'll start talking to you. But if you go in and try and write something that people have already studied, and you show you don't really understand the literature, then people will ignore you, okay? So think about that your work, that your research is examining one small part of a very broad literature, and you need to know who are the key authors in that literature, right? And write for them, not for everyone else. Think about your research program over time, and then here are some references that are you might want to read about writing literature reviews and so on. So, Juli, thank you for that. I'll stop sharing my screen now, and I'd be very happy to take any questions if there were some.
Okay, directly, you want to directly, provide the time for the discussion session? Because
okay, we'll do that in the discussion section. Sure.
Okay.
So I'll hand back to you, Julie, and I'm finished.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, sir. It was very interesting topic, especially how to write the literature review, because I have a huge problem with that, and I suppose I should discuss it with you later. Okay. And it is delightful to see that more than 200 participants join this webinar. But before we go to the next step, I would like to greet Professor Muhammad Soliman from Oman. Good morning, sir. And now we have to move to the second speaker, Mrs. Enny Susilowati Marjono, MSc, AKT, Ph.D, CFMA, Asian CPA. And I would like to read her brief CV. Could you please scroll down? So this is the CV of Ms. Enny Susilowati Marjono. She is a senior lecturer at Universitas Nuswantoro Semarang, and she graduated with bachelor and master degree from Diponegoro University in Semarang. She graduated with a Doctor of Philosophy in Accounting from National Yunlin University of Science and Technology, Taiwan. Her study in Taiwan was sponsored by the Taiwan Ministry of Education Scholarship, and she has also served as a deputy chair for the research and studies at FEB UDINUS or DITLICA from 2020 to 2021. And she is also the managing editor of a book entitled SDG, Indonesia Sustainable Goal 2045, collection of thought by Indonesian students worldwide in collaboration with LIPI or Indonesian Institute of Sciences. In terms of research, her research focuses on strategic business, in accounting management, stock market, finance, and audit. She has also published in several international referred journals such as Earning Management and Audit Committee, International Journal of Business and Society, Competition and Professional Service Organizations, Sustainability Journal, MAS, Alliance and SOC EVEC, Managerial Auditing Journal, Indirect Impact of Regulations and Taiwan Organizations, European Accounting Association or EAA, Accounting Controls and Mental Model, Journal of Economics, Business and Accounting Ventures, Reporter and Non-Reporter, Reporter and Reporter Company and Dividend Information, and also Journal of Finance and Banking and others. She also write her contact number or email, the email address of her. You can see from the screen. Okay, that's the CV of our second speaker, Mrs. Enny. Now it's your turn to present your paper. Time and floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Miss Julie, for hosting my curriculum vitae. Thank you very much, Prof. Vincent, for your opening remarks and for alluding to all participants about the value of the research. I also would like to say good afternoon, Prof. Noel, and nice to meet you. I'm happy to be collaborating with you at this international webinar. And good afternoon, my colleague, FEB UDINUS, and good afternoon for all participants. I also want to say big thanks to UDINUS for organizing this international webinar. They have been doing this for the last 2 years. At the time, we have the international webinar collaboration NYUST, UNTEC, and UDINUS, and it is part of UDINUS program to enhance research in Indonesia. And I have been participating in this for the last 2 to 3 years ago. And I think we all researchers need to be grateful for the vision that the UDINUS has provided us, particularly for you Indonesian researchers who are trying to improve the change of publishing in Scopus Journal as SCA Journal. So I say this is not likely. I said this because I have been affiliated with many conferences, and I do not see this type of vision to improve research at the grassroots level. So I think you people are very lucky, and this is not the only program that UDINUS offer to local researchers. There are many other programs, including the ISPS conference, obviously, where we give you a chance to come and present. That we set a certain number of spaces for local authors. There is also paper enhancement workshop that UDINUS does. So there is a collection of program for developing local research, and this is international webinar is a part of just wanted acknowledge to Prof. Vincent and Prof. Edi Nursasongko, Chancellor of Dian Nuswantoro University, for the vision they have to improve the research for this important milestone in sustainability research. Okay, I will share my PPT. Can you help me? Okay. All right. Okay, so I believe all you can see my screen now.
It's very clear, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes,
okay,
we can see it clearly.
Yes, I can see clearly. So my talk today is focusing on the value research. What you are doing to uniqueness, what the motivation, contribution. So these are the key aspects of publishing in good Scopus journals. So a lot of things that I'm going to say here today, you can go back and read some of papers or any of the papers recently published in Scopus, and you will find the guidelines on this issue. So I want to start off with a lot these things. I'm going to talk you in the next 20 until 25 minutes of my time. It is a reflection of my experience as a researcher that accepted in Reputable journal and as an editor in journal. I'm going to share with you today are not in any textbook. These are simple coming out of the experience of being an editor and researcher. So I think for that particular reason, this talk of mine is unique because it kind of reflect directly what editors and researchers go through when they look your paper. Okay, the first thing is what does a good paper consist of, and I think this is a very important question to begin with. Obviously, our paper starts with an abstract and then it goes to introduction. So abstract is small of the paper, so I'm keeping that away for the moment because the majority of the papers tend to reject it based on the quality of the introduction. So we should ideally start talking about what is a good introduction, right? Because if your introduction is good, So the chance are that you are going to enjoy some success. And I'm not saying a good introduction leads to an acceptance of the paper. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that a good introduction keeps you in the game. And what is the game? The game is you submit your paper to a journal, and the editor read it, like it, and send it to the reviewer, right? It does not guarantee that your paper will be accepted. What it does guarantee in the worst case scenario, if you are going to get a rejection, yes, but you are going to get at least one, or depending on the general, 2 reports, and referee reports are like a free advice to improve your paper, right? So that's the goal journal through which we work with. You can see in my first slide, this is the editor point of view. So what is a good introduction? Good introduction should have a motivation, right? And what is the motivation? Motivation basically means where you are doing this research, okay? So explaining why you are doing this research. What is the new thing? And what is your hypothesis as a result of what are you doing, okay? So motivation hypothesis is absolutely key. If you cannot motivate your research, meaning if you cannot say why you are doing this research and why you know it is an important piece of research, you should not do that research because it would not go into good Scopus journal. The next thing is, how does the finding at the literature? Okay, so what the new thing that you are adding to the literature again? This is extremely important thing. What are you contributing? If some people have already done that research, then why are you doing it? Because some editors are not interested in what others have done. Editor want to know what is the new thing you are doing. So before you start any research, you should ask the question, right? What is the new thing you are doing? What is a new compare to the literature? Okay, so unless what it means is that in order for you to answer the question successfully and in a meaningful way, you need to first understand what the literature is all about. And this is where the problem is that many of the researchers that I come across, and I have come across in the last 10 years globally, I mean, and I also in the Asia Pacific country. I believe that the researchers are not reading enough in the area of the research, because unless you read, you would not be able to know what is the gap in the literature, and hence you will not be able to tell in convincing way what is the new thing that are you doing in the paper. All right, and this is the key thing. A lot of papers get rejected, and many of you here who have got rejection letters. And talk about contribution, we would have seen a referrers writing the managerial contribution of this paper not sufficient enough, and that is very, very valid because it is not enough. And I will tell you later why it is not enough when you may think that is enough. Okay, so when you talk about contribution, as you can see, my next point is toward literature, you need to be very, very specific, very, very particular. And this is the literature, right? This is the literature weaknesses. This is the missing link. And by addressing that or filling that research gap, it is important for this research. Okay, so it needs to be very clear discussion of the gap in the literature and how you are filling that gap and why filling that gap is important. Okay, so this is a very important part to the story to your right. And then we go to are your result robust? 99% of you would be working with data, right? So it's applied research, and important part of applied research is to be able to say that your results are robust. Okay, so robustness play a very big part, and many papers get rejected because they don't have a robustness section in the paper. In other words, they don't talk about robustness at all because the robustness test is not enough or is not sound artificial. Right, so this is very important that when you are designing your research question, when you are collecting data, you need to at the same time before you have start doing anything else. Sometimes think about what constitute robustness. What are things? What are the different tests you are going to do to say something about the robustness of your findings? The point is that if you cannot come up with a list of things that you are going to do to say something about robustness, you should not do the research because this is that is not acceptable. Okay, talk about a length of introduction. So this is varies depending on the journal, and some journal would want shorter introduction. Some journal would want a bit lengthier, but all these components are important. They still need to be there. How much you read it depends on the journal, and obviously you need to go to the journal and read and understand. Okay, next slide. So component of an introduction. So this is some of the things that goes in the introduction. No more specifically, what is your research question? Is it the new? Okay. If somebody look at some research question, why you are doing it? Then the journal is not interested in those type of thing. And talk about hypothesis. Is it new? Okay, and talk about theory. What is the theory that motivates your hypothesis? So any research question that you put and you design needs to be supported by economic theory. If there is no theory, there is no research, right? Very simple equation. Many of the papers tend to be rejected because there is no supporting theory. Econometrically, you pick in 5-6 variable and you run a regression model, okay? And there is no economic support for the regression model. And talk about motivation, as I said earlier, why this research hypothesis test is important, okay? In contribution, like we talk about the contribution that you make the literature, what do we know from your research that we previously did not know that is important? Can you answer the question or not? If you can, don't do this research because it will not go to a good journal. If it does not go into a good journal, it does not do anything to your profile as a researcher. You would hear there's a lot of people with a 20, 30 publication, but nobody reads them. The high index is close to 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, right? Any hack index that is less than 20 is not good enough. in this modern higher education system, right? High index means how many people are reading your research and citing it. Okay, so that's why high index is widely used as benchmarks to know whether your research is a quality standard or not. So there is no point publishing in general where people are not reading and citing your paper, right? And you know, there are many people with 10 to 30 publication, but high index very low. So this any this less than 20 means same as 0, right? So this is the point. So you need to think about this way, that the introduction is the most important thing. You need to spend a lot of time on writing the introduction, and you come back to timing factor later. And a lot of time does not mean you spend 1 year writing an introduction. No, I didn't mean that. But what I mean is that you know there need to be serious effort writing, rewriting to effective. So now benchmark is to some more papers that you follow, right? So this is important things, important components of the introduction. Next slide. Okay, I please to next slide. Why the paper are rejected? Can you go to next slide? Yes. Why paper are rejected? Oh, now in general, why paper rejected? So of course I talk about introduction, but assuming that you have ticked the box, when it comes to introduction, you got a nice introduction. You have all those components that I talk about. Why else do papers get rejected? And I think this is important as well, okay? Because as I said earlier, a good introduction does not guarantee you anything. Okay, it can still be rejected. Good introduction is just a start, right? That you can think of that as a foundation where you build a house, right? You need a very strong foundation, otherwise your house is going to collapse. So it is a very similar sort of thing. Your introduction need to be written in very, very convincing way. That you know that we say movie armor, right? When you watch the movie in the first 4 or 5 minutes of watching a movie, you will either like it or you dislike it. In terms of interest, whether you want to continue watching it or you want to stop it, right? It is a very similar sort of feeling here. When it comes to introduction, you capture the imagination of the editors and the reviewers, okay? Now, why papers are rejected? Not well written. That's fairly straightforward, like a lot of language issues. So your paragraphs are not following. You know, you say something here, then you jump to something else. So there is no flow idea. Yes, again, it is a very similar sort of thing, the movie, right? You are watching a movie and in the skin, don't fit in the skin, you will tend to criticize it, right? You will not like that particular movie. So it is the same case. So imagine if a movie, a scan from the middle of the movie comes in the beginning, right? What does it do to your views and sentiment about the ride? You will have a negative sentiment about it, right? Good idea, but not completely address it. That's what happened with editors and reviewers when they read your paper. If there is no flow of argument, there is a missing link. Then, of course, they would lose interest in your work. Reviewers and editor would not read it. And many times you would have seen from the review report, you will say, oh, I have said this on page 7, but the reviewer is saying, I have not said it. And you are then saying, oh, the reviewer has not read my paper carefully. It is not the fault of the reviewer. It is the fault of you, because you have not presented your paper in a way that attracts the attention of the reader, right? What you have got on page 7 should have been on page 3. This is for example. Okay, so this is the type of things that we are talking about here, right? And talk about the other issue, a weak literature review. A weak literature review meaning you are not aware of what other people have done in your area. Hence, there is a problem in how you are trying to sell the contribution of your paper, and no theory, as I said, too much statistic. No theory. What is mean no theory in here? Too much statistic, no economic story. There is no economic story behind it. So you run regression report statistic, your regression result, but there is no discussion of what it means in economic terms. No robustness test. As I said earlier, no robustness test even if your paper is perfect. A language is fine, well written. If you don't have robustness test, 90% of the good journal are going to reject it. Okay. So a robustness test also means can your result be reproduced. So there is ethical aspect of your research as well. Okay, please go to next slide. Yes, this is things to keep in mind for your research. Okay, so having said all that, what are the things to keep in mind for your research? Some broad things for your takeaway. What are topical research are in your field? You need to know this research question is extremely important thing. You need to do something. What is topical, right? So what is that? Why do you need that as an editor? Well, as an editor want to publish something that topical. Why? Because editor want others to read and cite that paper. Okay. The journal will only grow if the papers that editor publish in the journal are cited by readers. So editor is looking at it is topical. What is going to say this? If editor publish the paper now, who is going to cite this paper? This is the question the editor asks. So sometimes, as you know, the very good paper get rejected. Why? Because there are no topical enough from the editor point of view. That's why sometimes you get a rejection letter where you can look, the reviewer said that this paper can be improved. The comments are not major. These are some things that you could solve in revise your paper in 2-3 months, right? Editor rejected your paper because editor does not find your paper attractive enough from a citation point of view. So we go to speed of completion. Speed of completion, this is very important. Why? Because there is immense global competition of the 4 papers, right? Journals are not longer short of papers. Editor receive a lot of papers, and they can only publish about 10 until 20% of what they receive, right? This is very important. And again, this is another reason why some very good papers tend to get rejected because editor cannot publish them. So this is very important. How quickly do the research without compromising the quality? And we go to the paper is well written, free of error. Last point is paper need to be well written. It needs to be free of errors. If you have got errors, it's so that you are close researchers. You are not professional about it. You don't take care of your paper. Paper is well written, free of errors. Don't rush into submitting your paper once you have done it. You need to get it language edited. Yes, there is a cost factor in it, but there's a spirit matter altogether. Okay, please go to next slide. Okay, this is a general types on writing skill. The first, read what you write. Read multiple times. This is very important. Learn by reading and observing others. So you should the literature. You should know what your limitations are. You should work on improving this part of your research by reading. Reading means you read only those things in which you are weak, right? And you may be weak in writing the result of the paper. Some of you may be weak in writing in conclusion, right? Some of you may be weak in writing introduction. Okay, go to next slide. Okay, carry your favorite articles. Carry your favorite article when you are traveling. Favorite articles mean articles that you are very fond with and you find inspiration in them. It is easy to understand, and these are mostly top journal articles that can offset the framework of your research. And we go to borrow learns by reading from non-related articles. You might find something that's published in accounting journal, and you are working in economic or finance that will be related. Because learning by reading, they give you sense of innovation and some of things that you can do to make your work different. And the next, write and rewrite. Writing something, be prepared to delete and write again until it's perfect. And then encourage one of your colleagues to read in order for you to get one of two of those comments that actually prompt you rating some of the things to make your work better. Okay, go to next slide. Okay, I'm going to discuss here, just sharing my experience in writing and publishing manuscript in journal practical guide. As per you know, that writing in the journal, especially in Scopus journal and SSGI journal, is very difficult undertaking. So I will start my talk with the motivation, why we need to publish in the journal. Then I will continue with my experience in writing in article or journal, and also we as researcher should respond referrals comment. So let's start with the motivation. Whenever we get frustrated with the subfrequent rejection that we have from journal, I think it's useful this 4 points. Okay, the motivation why publishing in journal. Please go to next slide. Okay, this is the motivation why publishing in the journal. Firstly, it is the highest form of academic publication above any other form of publication. So if we are able to publish in international journal, we should be proud of it because it is a confirmation about our academic credential. And secondly, through a plain referring system, it provides a benchmark of the quality of one's academic writing. So we know if we get rejected so many times, then we know that our quality is not there yet. But if we get accepted, then we know that we have the threshold. And then thirdly, it is a very effective form of a dissemination both of for academic as well as policy audience. In my experiences, whenever I publish an article in journal, I usually receive query from academic, also from policymaker about article. And as I have mentioned earlier, it is a very important mark of our academic career. People in the bureaucracy, their career is their position in the bureaucracy. But for us, academic, our career is our publication, especially publication in the journal. And the fourth, it is a very important mark of one's academic career. The higher in the rating of a journal, the higher the academic credential of writer. So please go to next slide. Please go to next slide. Previous slide. Sorry, previous slide. Yes. Previous slide. Previous slide. Previous slide. Yes. No, previous slide. Okay. Writing and publishing a manuscript in journal, a practical guide. The outline, in my experience, it is quite useful when we write an article or a manuscript for a journal to start by preparing on the outline. An outline basically the structure of the paper, so it includes a number of major heading, subheading, also include main idea each section. We have to make sure that this outline contains essential element of manuscript, such as introduction, the problem to be addressed, literature review to discuss previous research on the topic, the method and the data used in the study, the result of the analysis and their interpretation, conclusion to summarize the finding and implication for policy and further research. Okay, next slide, please. Yes, next. Okay, this is okay. We will see that this the example here from one of my paper. I apologize. This is too small, but you don't have to read it. I just want to show that this is an example of outline where I divided the structure of the paper is like this. The first section, introduction. Second section is the data. The third section is chart market work Indonesia. This is basically the literature review. Then the fourth section is the estimation strategy. The last section is the effect of chart market work on human capital, which is actually this is the research section. And the discussion of the research. Then we do some heterogeneity tests, unity based on gender, based on location, and based on the type of book. Then we end with the conclusion. So that the structure of the paper, but we see that in each section, we have already put on the main idea. In this section, we have a thing that we will develop later in the paper. Okay, next slide. Yeah. Okay, this is writing a first draft. Now I'm going back to the outline. So after we have the outline, we must make sure that we have everything that we need to write efficiently, such as data, reference, table, figure, etc. Consolidate them into outline. And then the second, so we put all these table and figures into the outline. When we have completed, that, then we start writing by developing the main idea. Continue to write without editing. And next, and then connect the parts to make whole flowing manuscript. And we should revise until manuscript makes a consistent story. Okay, next slide. Okay, slide. This is writing an abstract. After we have finished the manuscript, then we have to complete it with an abstract. So an abstract is basically a condensed version of the manuscript, which highlight the major point, incorporate and concisely describe its content and scope. An effective abstract will improve the sense of manuscript being accepted and also encourage people to read it. How to make abstract? Okay, how to make abstract? At the first, identify the main objective, data, method, main result of the conclusion. Assemble the information into a single paragraph, usually up to 100 until 250 words. Lastly, check to see if it meets the guidelines of the targeted journal. So, okay, next slide. Yes, this is an example of my paper, SGI journal Q1 that I wrote with my colleagues. There is abstract in here, so I give you the example. The first sentence, the objective of the paper. You can see here. It is clear or not? Okay, and then the second sentence, we continue with the data. And the third sentence, I explain about the method briefly. We address it. And the rest sentence are the conclusion of the other findings of our study. This paper was published in MAG, Management Auditing Journal, SSCA Journal Q1, publishing by Emerald. Before this paper was accepted by MAG Journal, Emerald, it was rejected 2 times by other reputable journal. So it is true, it is not easy to have publication in the reputable journal. Next slide. Yes. Checklist for the final manuscript. We have complete manuscript, including abstract, and then before submitting in the journal, we should do the checklist. Yes, there is a 7 checklist for the final manuscript. The firstly, it say precisely what we want to say, and the second, follow a logical flow, and as per I mentioned before, why the paper must follow the logical flow, and then write them in direct sentence with only one main idea per paragraph and 1 point per sentence, and then brief and concise, no missing essential element, no repetition, and internally consistent.
Okay, Mrs. Enny.
Okay.
To interrupt you, you still have 3 minutes.
Okay.
Time for the presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I go to result next. I go to result next. Most don't just for result, don't just describe the result of the in table. Explain the result. What are you getting? What do the numbers mean? What does 0.56 mean? the example, how the result consistent with theory, how do the related to the literature review. Next. Discussion, what do the result mean? If you have some statistical result, what is the economic meaning? What is the exciting? If you find some different result from the literature, can you explain it? You have to explain, otherwise reviewers will question this and will reject. And then next, responding to reviewers' comments. After a few months, less than 6 months, we will have a reviewer comment sending back to us by the journal. If after 6 months we don't hear anything from the journal, I think we can write to them as asking about what happened with our manuscript. In reading the reviewer's comment, we need to read them carefully and calmly. Please do not take the reviewer comment personally, because some reviewers write revision very harsh comment. So it's not about the harshness. Try to find out try to assess which comment can and cannot be adapted in revising the manuscript. This may require analysis of data or do some more analysis of data. In this slide, you can see we get an invitation to revise and resubmit in addition to revised manuscript. We should also write the document responding to the reviewer comments, point by point, and please be polite in writing documentary. No matter how hard our feeling was because of the comment, we should respond very politely. This is the example, my responding to reviewers' comment related my paper they accepted in MAJ Journal SHGI Q1. I will read this is okay. This go to yes. This is the example. You can see. This is the reverse comment. The analysis in the study compared the business condition of audit firm before and after 2003, but it is unnecessary to consider the impact of the entire economic and background. It seems the GDP is included in the calculation formula. Is that enough? So my response is, we appreciate your comment and add a paragraph to explain your concern above as follow. In addition to the GDP, we add another indicator of an entire economy as background. The study include the market value of public company in Taiwan during the sample period. The untabulated figure indicate a similar result as this report in table 3 and 4. We put the main result in the section additional test on page 18 in red color in revised version follow. This is just for the example. Next. Okay. Yes. This is the reason of manuscript rejection. Okay, and then this is a decision of manuscript acceptance. Contribution are relevant to the field, extent of writing, quality of study design. Okay, next. Okay, next. Okay, concluding remarks. Publication in Scopus Journal is difficult. It was easier 10 years ago. Competition for space. Many journals in Scopus that were receiving 200 to 300 paper a year 10 years ago, but now journal are not receiving 700, 800 papers a year, right? That is the market. So reviewer choose the paper because it is more topical and it is going to generate more citation. So I think next. Yeah, I think that's all my sharing of my experience in writing and publishing an article for a good journal. Finally, to conclude again, I agree that writing for a journal is challenging, but rewarding activity. So once the manuscript has been published, all the effort pay off. Thank you and happy writing.
Well, the topic delivered by Mrs. Enny was very interesting, as it based on her experience as a writer and also editor of a journal. Okay, both of the speakers already finished their presentation, and now we move in the discussion session. Well, anyone, you can raise your hand or use the chat room to ask. But before asking the question, please mention your name and the institution you belong to. But I see in the chat room, that there are 2 participants already asked question addressed to Professor Noel. The first is Pak Nuswantoro. He is the lecturer of Economic and Business Faculty of Universitas Nuswantoro. He asked two questions to Professor Noel: how to create a review literature article with limited digital library resources, because in our place access to digital libraries is very limited. And the second question is, how many articles should be reviewed to be used as a review literature articles? And it is already answered by Professor Noel. The answer is access to paper is really important, but try and find a recent review paper first. And we can use the Google Scholar. And the second question is already answered by him too. It depends on the topic. Less than 10 means that the topic is not well developed, and more than 100 means that you are too broad. That's the answer from Professor Noel for Pak Ndot. And the second question is from Mbak Neni Aryani. Okay. He asked question addressed to Professor Noel. As a beginner writer and want to publish on Scopus, what are the important things that we pay attention to in finding the right journal to submit? Thank you. And the answer? And the answer from Professor Noel?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was not paying attention.
Okay, Professor.
I think Professor already answered the question of Neni Aryani, Mrs. Juli.
Okay.
Yes, in the chat room.
Okay, sir. I read the question from the participant, and I'll also read the answer from you for Pak Ndot and Bu Enny. Bu Nani. The second answer is, when you should review the literature, you will find that one or two journal publish lots of paper on the topic. Pick that journal. Okay, and I suppose that there is still one participant have a question addressed to Professor Noel in the chat room. The first question is, this is from Pak Rianto. Professor Noel, he asks question: what distinguishes a reputable international journal? And the second is, will it be difficult to publish research from a researcher who differs from his previous work? And also he asks your email address. Please answer the question, sir.
Thank you. Well, I'll give an answer to I've put my email in the chat, so that's already there. I'll give an answer, and then perhaps I could ask, or perhaps Ibu Enny might be able to give her opinion as well, because I really liked your presentation, Enny. It was you've obviously been involved in journals and things for many years, so it was a very good presentation. Well done. In terms of the two questions, what distinguishes a reputable international journal? Oh, look, there are all sorts of different metrics and things that you can use. There's often in some countries, for example, in Australia, there are lists of journals that are considered as reputable, and in fact they're all ranked in terms of their impact factor and divided into 4 quarters. So publishing in Q1 journals is seen as better than publishing in Q2 journals, and so on. So I either find from your university what international journals it recognizes and their ranking, or use look at the impact factors, and you'll find generally that there's lots of those lists around if you go looking for them. They depend. So often they depend upon the topic, the disciplinary area or the field of study. Will it be difficult to publish research from a researcher who differs from his previous work? Well, this comes back to the question about how should a person only publish in one area, or should they publish in 2 or 3 different areas? And it's tricky because on one hand, academics want to focus on interesting topics, but on the other hand, being able to write a good paper requires knowledge of the theory and background. So it's a sort of a bit of a balancing act between doing one area and becoming an expert in that, and jumping to 2 or 3 areas, or 4 or 5. And the more you jump, it's harder, because you have to demonstrate that you have an understanding of each new area that you get into. I've done a bit of jumping, but I do find these days it's harder to demonstrate that I am aware of the literature in each new area I get into, because the literature is becoming so big. On the other hand, there is a difference between publishing on different topics and publishing using different theories. So one way to go is to consider yourself that you are a methodologist. That is, you are an expert in methodology, and you apply that methodology to different areas. And therefore, although the topics, one time you're studying consumer behavior, or another time you're studying something else, but you're using the same, you can justify that you're experienced in using the same method in these different fields. A second way to go is to consider yourself a theorist and apply the same theory, but in different areas. So that's what I'm sort of trying to do these days. I'm trying to apply particular theories, but in different fields. So cognitive psychology theory in different areas is what I'm trying to do. But generally, establishing in yourself as a credible person is in an area is getting more difficult, and you need to perhaps even do a literature review in each area you get into before you might find that you have the confidence to write on it. So that's tricky. But perhaps Ibu Enny has some comments as well.
Enny, do you have a comment for this question?
No, thank you on the answers.
I think from Prof. Noel is enough.
Okay. Okay, I also find a question from a student named Vika Vira. He's from Bandung. He asked question addressed to Bu Enny. Her question is about robustness check. Which robustness check best to use, and if you have any good reference for conducting this robustness check, please inform.
Okay. Okay. The question about robustness check. Okay. Let me start with the first one. I think robustness is very, very important, because many a good journal, including Scopus Q1, Q2, and Q3 as SGI. I mean, we do not accept papers if they don't have a robustness test. there are good papers that have rejected. There were a number of good papers which reviewers rejected, just not because they were poor idea, but just because they did not have anything to say about robustness. And reviewers do spend a significant amount of the time reviewing the paper. Reviewer have an internal system where we do a very robust review by at least 2 people. Reviewer also have a checklist factor that reviewer consider in the intersecting paper. So a reviewer will do to Scopus journal in this robustness test is part of it. So, and it has become a big part of the game, in the publishing. Okay, the next question. Which robust check best to use if you have any good reference for conducting this robustness check? So the very first you coming up with idea of the research, and then go first of all to the literature and see whether the research question and then enough. I give you enough scope to say that that you are doing something you already people have work on it. So see what people have been using robustness test on the subject. So it is a robustness test that actually is depend on your research time in your research team. What is the robustness test for me? For example, doing financial market volatility is going to be very, very different for you if you are working on property and labor market. You see that I'm trying to say that the point here is who guides you in terms of what is robustness. It is the literature. It comes directly from the literature because every robustness test that you are going to argue in your paper, you will say that the example Taylor 1999 has done this to show this. Therefore, one robustness test I'm going to do is the following Taylor 1999. This is for example. So robustness test has to be linked to something that people have done in the literature. So the conclusion is this is depend of the literature, the previous literature. I think this is my answer, Mrs. Juli.
Okay, thank you for the answer, ma'am. And the second question in the chat room is also addressed to Mrs. Enny Susilowati from Tarisa Robiana. He's from Semarang. She's from Semarang. He asked about the best research method for conceptual paper. Do we need to target Scopus journal? Does it need to have to be Scopus? Because we have other index like Web of Science and other index.
Okay. The question is, what is the best research method for the conceptual papers? Okay, best research method for conceptual papers. Again, it really depends, if you are working in properly household income and inequality and labor market, the methodology are quite different compared to somebody working in the financial market monetary policy macro and prudential policies, So you need to connect to the literature guide you on what are the best methods. For instance, in financial market, Gart's model and Gart's model are very well used. When you look at your labor market, you look at your GDP. Like the example research in the MRJ, I use the GDP because it is measured at the labor market. So it is depend of the method for conceptual papers depend of the you working in what what part of the research literature. I think my answer like that. And the second question, do we need to get Scopus journal? Does it need to have to be Scopus journal? Because we have other index like Web of Science and other index journal. So as per I explained before, that if we submit to reputable journal, it's depend of the talk about of the motivation, new thing that you are doing, your contribution, why you are doing this, your robustness test, and there is a theory. There is a theory, or basically whether the paper is free or for error. I think published in the international journal. I think for note is a must, because the development of the research now is very strictly, so we must learn how to accept that in the reputable journal. Although we have so many indexing, whatever we can, we have the indexing Scopus, we have the indexing Web of Science, we have indexing in Indonesia, the example is Sinta. I think all of the indexing have the advantage and have the knowledge of the best for the next future good research. I think this is my answer, Miss Juli.
Okay, thank you. As a MC and also moderator, I would like to ask to pose question to Professor Noel. Professor, are you still there?
Yes, I am.
Okay. At this period, I'm pursuing my doctoral degree, and I have a huge problem when I have to start writing the literature review. It's really hopeless because I don't know where do I have to start. Would you please telling me in detail where do I have to start and what I have to write for the literature review, for concept, for what is it, providing the concept of literature review?
Yeah. Well, firstly, congratulations, because doing a PhD is hard, and many people, when they first begin a thesis, they think that it's going to be easy, and it's not, right? But on the other hand, I would say 95% of all people who begin a PhD finish. Okay, so it's not rocket science, it's working hard. So then, and the second thing I'd say is congratulations, because one of the first steps that you need to make on your PhD journey is to recognize that you are getting confused. Okay, and I tell people confusion is the first step to enlightenment. Okay, so you're not going to finish your PhD until you have got confused. Okay, so well done. So then, may I ask just briefly how many papers you've read?
Up to the present, it's more than 100, sir.
Okay,
Mostly,
good. Yeah.
I read in a qualitative paradigm.
Okay. And what's your topic?
My topic? My topic is in taxation for small medium enterprises.
Okay. So The first thing is taxation. And when you're studying taxation for small to medium enterprises, what's a concept that you've sort of identified, something that's connected to a theory that you think might be useful in your study?
Well, something that interests me is when the COVID-19 developed in this country, the government is already provide the incentive for the SMEs, but unfortunately, they didn't. What is it? They didn't. They didn't take that incentive, and it is weird. It is weird because according to the news, many of the SMEs in Indonesia are collapsed, and why the government is already offer them aid, but they don't get it. They didn't take it. I think it's, what is it? It is it's very, very interesting to me.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, I understand. And so your topic seems to be about small business failure, when and their ability to take incentives that might be offered by government. Now, when you've studied that, have you found any potential explanations for it, for that phenomena?
Well, I think so. Even though to get the data is very, very difficult.
Yeah, no, you haven't got to data yet.
Okay.
Don't forget about data. What's the possible explanations?
What do you mean, sir?
Well,
Sorry.
why do you think it's possible that people wouldn't take the incentives?
That's why, sir. That's why, because I've already asked the tax office, and they don't even know.
No. So
okay.
the tax office doesn't know, but so somewhere in the small business literature,
Okay.
there will be someone who has studied problems of small business, right?
Okay.
And in that literature, they will have looked at perhaps they will have looked at difficulties of small business in dealing with government.
Okay.
Or perhaps they have studied difficulties that small business have in learning important bits of information, right? And but perhaps even Ibu Enny might already know some of the potential literature that you could use. But the point is, at the moment, you're just thinking about the phenomena, that is the thing that has happened. People aren't taking these initiatives. Now, before you go and collect data, right, you've got to have some conceptual framework to think about this problem. That conceptual problem will come from your review of previous literature. You said you've read 100 papers. What are some potential ways to think about that problem?
I'm still working with it, sir.
Well, all right. Well, so that's your problem. So you haven't yet identified a conceptual explanation or a potential conceptual explanation for this problem. So that's because you haven't connected into the a potentially important stream of literature on the topic. There will be several. One that springs to mind for me is small business failure. And so within the small business failure literature, there would be a number of different ideas about why small businesses fail. And you could apply those to understand why people haven't taken the government government incentives. But that would be one opportunity. There would be other explanations that you could apply. And then you would then do some sort of literature review to say, I'm studying this phenomena. the phenomena is failure of small business due to not accepting government. This literature can be explained by the literature within small business failure, or by this one, or by that one. I'm going to, for these reasons, study it using theory B. And then when I study theory B, I find a lot of interesting issues here. And I'm going to study this part of theory B applied to my literature. And that's where your conceptual framework comes from. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much for your explanation. It's very beneficial for me. Thank you so much.
No problem. Well, I don't know if it helped, but it's, so you've got the problem over here and you've got to match it to some theoretical explanation. Now, no one will have studied COVID and government incentives, but someone will have studied a problem which you can say is similar in some way. Okay, that's what you've got to do. So that's the process called conceptualization. It's taking your problem, which you think is unique, and matching it against some other theories which actually describe the same type of phenomena. Okay, and you haven't just found that match yet. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. It's really mean to me, your explanation.
Good. That's my aim in life.
And now time is 11:35. I suppose that we have to end this webinar. I believe.
Julie, just before you go.
Okay.
One last bit of advice.
Okay.
Talk to people, right? So what you want to do, there's Enny over there. She's obviously a very smart and intelligent person. Why don't you go and discuss your problem with her and just say, hey, Enny, can you think of any theories that I could apply that might explain this? And then talk to Professor Vincent and say the same thing, and talk to as many people as you can. And after you've talked to 50 people, the answer will become clear. Okay?
Yes, I will follow your advice.
Right.
Thank you so much. Well, everyone, we have to end this webinar. I believe you still have a lot to talk and to think about, but we are limited by time. And I would like to express my gratitude to both speakers, Professor Noel Scott, Ph.D. and Mrs. Enny, for your time with us in this webinar. I hope we can meet again in the other event. And I also would like to thank to all the participants for participating and joining us today. And on behalf of the committee, I would ask for apologize if there are some shortcomings from myself or from the committee. And goodbye and see you again. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Professor Noel Scott. Thank you, Bu Enny.
Thank you, Professor Noel.
Professor Noel,
Thank
thank you,
God
Julie.
bless you, Professor. Thank you so much.
Professor Enny, I thought your presentation was wonderful. I really enjoyed that. I thought it was very insightful.
Oh, your presentation is good too, Prof.
You're good. Thank you.
Both of you are awesome.